Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. For those of you that like to get to the juicy story where you have the straightforward Bigfoot encounter, well, I've got that for you on this channel right now. But the full stories are really worth listening to, and I've got them listed at the bottom, because really, just the Bigfoot encounter without the whole experience from the beginning to the middle and the end is really worth listening to. But if you just want to get to the juicy encounter that people have sent in to me, by all means, here are a few examples of them right now on my channel. So get straight into the business, shall we? And let's get started.
Suddenly I heard a very loud slapping sound on the side of the cabin, almost as if someone was deliberately hitting the wooden beams of the cabin with a very large, heavy pole. The dogs went ballistic, and their barks were deafening, and the cats all scrambled under the furniture, hiding away in terror. If this was how the animals were behaving, the disturbances on this night were unusual for them. Should I be worried, I wondered? Should I call the police or a neighbour, or should I just wait and see if everything calmed down? And I'm glad to say that it actually did. The next few days that followed were incredibly beautiful, and the nights that followed were peaceful and serene, and I was beginning to forget about the intruder on my first night. But then the same disturbances began all over again, but this time the noises were thunderously loud, as whatever it was relentlessly banging the house like a heavy drum, as if it was trying to get my attention. I stumbled out the front door, clutching the rifle very tightly with both the two wolfhounds running behind me. They were looking up at the cabin and barking hysterically. I could smell this foul skunk-like odour in the air, and as I looked up at the cabin roof, I saw the silhouette of the most monstrous bipedal creature looking directly down at me. Bear in mind I'm a New Yorker, and I'm obliviously unaware of cryptid-like creatures like Bigfoot. Of course I have heard about those things before, but the notion of such a creature actually existing was preposterous in my mind's eye. I actually believed people who believed in such things were naive and gullible. As I gazed up at the rooftop, I knew I was facing a very dangerous, colossal creature, and whatever it was, I had no idea. I just stared up at it in stupefied silence, hardly daring to believe what I was actually seeing. This thing was colossal, much bigger and more frightening than a grizzly, and its body was covered with dark, short hair. What I noticed about this creature was the weird cone-shaped head that flowed down seamlessly to a huge pair of shoulders, bypassing any need for a neck. The upper torso of this thing reminded me of the Incredible Hulk. It was so monstrously big that it made the hips and legs look thin by comparison, yet in reality every appendage of this gargantuan beast was monstrously big. I'm not good at estimating weights and heights as a general rule. However, I think I can safely say this thing weighed 1,000 pounds and was at least 10 foot tall. The creature stared at me with a very large, primate-looking face, with a very prominent brow ridge, flat nose and a thin mouth, but it was those eyes, so deep-set and brown, but had a very definite red eye-shine that put the fear of God into every cell of my body. The eyes were as round as saucers, and truly they glowed in a red traffic-light colour. It felt like they penetrated me like a red laser light. I watched the creature pounding the cabin with the large timber pole he was carrying in his long arms. It was like he wanted me to see what he was actually doing. What on earth was he trying to do, I wondered? Why was he beating the cabin like this? If he was trying to scare me, it was working because I was terrified. I was a city boy, and stuff like this I knew nothing about. It was all beyond me. I aimed the rifle at the creature, not knowing what else to do. And when he saw me do this, he let out the most awful, frightful scream, and it sounded almost feminine, almost like a female being murdered. It was so terrifying that even the dogs yelped in terror and scuttled back into the cabin, looking for somewhere to hide. I watched the creature jumping off the side of the house, about a 14-foot drop, I kid you not, and the creature landed on his feet that appeared to be very padded, with the agility of a domestic cat. And then he literally tottered away on his padded feet across the ground with the speed and grace of a cheetah, and then he was gone from my sight. I stood there for a long moment in total silence and absolute awe, trying to mentally comprehend and make sense of everything that had just transpired, And then I went back indoors and bolted every single door and window, and I allowed the dogs to pee on newspaper because I was not coming out of that cabin until the morning. The next day I examined the area outside where the creature had scuttled away, and there was an area beyond the gravel where the ground was actually wet, and I discovered 3 very distinct footprints that measured at least 17 inches in the ground. Now, believe me, that's big. Suddenly I noticed a young woman coming up the drive. In truth, I was relieved to see someone human after everything that had occurred the previous night. She had brown hair tied back in a ponytail and was wearing jeans, boots and a white blouse. "Hello," she said, reaching for my hand. "My name is Sue. I'm your closest neighbour. Tina told me you were looking after the animals while she's away. I know this is going to sound strange, but I wondered if you've been experiencing any strange activity, such as banging sounds at night on your cabin." "How do you know about that?" I asked. "Because something weird's been going on over the last 3 days. 3 of the neighbours have been experiencing these angry drumming sounds on their houses. I just wondered if you got to see anything. Everyone was too afraid to go outside their houses to see what was going on, but something was on their roofs, banging away very violently." "I saw it," I said to Sue, and I proceeded to tell her about what had happened and how I had seen this massive creature on my roof hitting the cabin like a drum. "You do know what you saw," said Sue. "I believe you saw a Bigfoot." "But are those things actually real?" I asked. "You tell me," she said. "You're the one that actually saw it." "What does he want?" I asked. "Good question," said Sue. "Why, after all these years, without ever seeing sight or sound of these things, is this creature very suddenly trying to scare us all half to death? And not just you, all 3 of the neighbours." "Have you ever seen one?" I asked. "No, never. But I have heard their whoops and owl calls, so I know they're out there. People go looking for these things, you know, but they tend to be so elusive and private. There are occasional sightings, but some people believe they're bogus or misidentified." "And you?" I asked. "Do you believe these sightings are bogus?" "If I did then, I don't now. I know there's a huge creature on our roof last night, banging away, and you got to see a Bigfoot, so it's clearly what's going on. A Bigfoot has been terrorising not only you, but 3 of the other neighbours too." "Where do you think they actually live?" I asked. "Look around you," laughed Sue. "There are forests absolutely everywhere, abundant wildlife, loads of water sources. What is there not to like for a Bigfoot here? They could live anywhere around here, especially in those forests." "Has there been any changes around here recently?" I asked suddenly. "I have heard that animals don't like sudden change." "Oh my word," gasped Sue. "You could be onto something there. All this commotion started after my dad started logging in that forest over there," she said, pointing in a southerly direction. "It could be their habitat. I suggest maybe it's a spot where they live and they're expressing their anger." "Excuse me," said Sue. "I've just had an idea. I'm going to phone the logging team and find out if they've been experiencing any abuse from this creature." She dialed a number on her mobile phone, and I watched her pacing up and down the drive very nervously. "But where did they go?" I heard her say. "When did this happen?" "What did you say? Thanks, Rolf. Speak to you later." Sue looked at me, and her face went as white as a sheet. "The loggers have all bailed," she said. "They're simply refusing to work because they've been terrified. Something's been watching them and has been throwing big boulders at them while they've been logging. They've been hearing growling and roaring sounds in the forest and seen the shadow of a giant-like creature staring at them through the trees, and he's hostile, aggressive and relentless in his actions. And apparently the forest stinks because of this thing." "It must be the Bigfoot I saw," I said. "He was colossal." "Well, we're all in danger if something's not done about this. I'll speak to my dad." The next day I learnt from Sue that they were no longer going to log that particular area, and her father had called a halt to the activity and the logging because he didn't want this creature to harm anyone, and he didn't want to go after the thing either with all guns blazing. "We need to leave those things well alone," he'd said. The moment the logging stopped, so did the banging on all our homes, and everything went back to normal, and I was able to enjoy the rest of my stay at my aunt's cabin. I did go with Sue to see the woods where the loggers experienced the Bigfoot activity, and they were beautiful and teeming with wildlife, and there was a sparkling spring running through the whole area. While we were there, the forest went incredibly quiet, and we did sense eyes on us, so we both left the place as fast as we could and have never been back. I returned to New York and continued my life, but something in me has changed dramatically. I used to be so set in my opinions about things and reluctant to consider other possibilities, but now I'm much more open to things. I also believe it's made me a much nicer person, more sensitive to the feelings of others, and I like myself more these days. What some people might poo-poo as impossible, I will stop and consider, because who knows, it could and it just might be true.
So there we are. That's the juicy bits of our stories tonight. I personally think you should go back and listen to the whole story because it makes it so much more exciting, because then you learn all about where it happened, the location, and all about the fabulous characters involved in the story. And that makes the story so much more gripping. But as I say so, go down to the description and then click on to the YouTube link, and then you will hear the whole story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.